An authoritarian streak more broadly running through this government, as there was through the government before it, as there was through the government before that, and before that. It's a common theme, liberal or conservative, is abusing Parliament, running roughshod over individual rights. In this case, we've got a government that has been passing omnibus bill after omnibus bill, depriving refugees of the right to an independent hearing, opening the way to warrantless access to subscriber information. So this is of a piece with that. And the long and the short of it is more power for the powers that be and less power for the average citizen.
Welcome back to another episode of Stand on Guard. I'm your host, David Crane. Thank you for joining me today. We're going to be continuing to examine the Psy-Ops that's going on against Pierre Poilievre. Why am I convinced about that? Well, we'll talk about that. You're watching Stand on Guard. We're broadcasting to you live from the Ottawa area, your nation's capital. Still is. And we'll be back in mere moments.
The Prime Minister lied and his minions continue to lie.
Your home is your castle. We're calling on the government to introduce and immediately pass the Stand on Guard law.
But we also need to resolve to resist.
Okay. We'll do it live. Okay. No. We'll do it live. I'll write it and we'll do it live.
Before we get on to the news of the day, this is a little appeal from yours truly to you. We need your subscriptions. We need subscribers. We are really, really getting bulldozed on YouTube. And I'm appealing you. Share this broadcast with your friends and family. Like it. And subscribe. Need numbers between now and Christmas. It's been a really difficult month so far. I'm not one to whine. We do our job. We get on with it. But I don't spend enough time appealing to you. And sometimes YouTube will unsubscribe you and you don't even know it. So make sure you are subscribed. And if you're watching on YouTube, remember to hype and share this content. We're trying to get 80,000 by Christmas. Well, I think that's a little optimistic at this point. But you never know. Miracles can happen in this time of year. So, to support independent journalists, you can join the Craden's Right Resistance, become a paid member of your YouTube. Send a super chat or Rumble rant. Become a paid subscriber in X or a paid subscriber to the Substack newsletter, where you can also access the George Orwell audiobook series, including the 1984 novel that we have available. So thank you for that brief, for allowing me that brief entry here. I want to show this video again because this might be the beginning. This might represent the beginning of the end for the Mark Carney government. The fact that even the mainstream media, who are very much in his pocket, are beginning to say there's something wrong here, something amiss about Mark Carney. And I think they're starting to see through the mythology. And Mark Carney is all about mythology. It's always been about how this is a competent man, the embodiment of competency.
A lot, and it seems to me that a lot of governments are using a crisis to dispense with accountability on a whole load of fronts.
It's to exempt an entity from any law that they choose, short of the criminal code. So it's breathtakingly wide-ranging, and basically for any reason they choose, where there's some very vague parameters set around it. But there's an authoritarian streak more broadly running through this government, as there was through the government before it, as there was through the government before that, and before that. It's a common theme, liberal or conservative, is abusing Parliament, running roughshod over individual rights. In this case, we've got a government that has been passing omnibus bill after omnibus bill, depriving refugees of the right to an independent hearing, opening the way to warrantless access to subscriber information. So this is of a piece with that. And the long and the short of it is more power for the powers that be and less power for the average citizen.
What is, I don't know if you know this, but what is the understanding of why the government feels they need this? Like, is there some justification for it that would be worth considering?
So it's a little bit more limited than I think how Andrew's framing it. But first of all, okay. So I think it's important to say this was not in the copy of the budget that we were given in the lockup.
In the print one, yeah.
It's buried in Annex 5, which is not included in the print copy of the budget.
Oh, not in the print copy, okay.
And it doesn't actually say, it just says that they're amending the Red Tape Reduction Act. So when you look at what's actually in the bill, what they seem to be trying to do is to exempt a company, a person, an unregistered company, an entity, as Andrew called it, that from laws that are in place to allow for the testing of a product or a service or a regulation, which is a law.
Red tape. They want to get rid of the red tape. Is that the idea?
Well, so to allow for something that would make the economy, and this is in the law, help the economy or innovation, or like these are very broad parameters.
Sure.
And when I asked the government, so I went back and forth with them for a week to find out, like, what is it that you're, this seems a little weird. Why do you need this? And like, how, like, what, can you give me an example of how it would be used? And they basically told me that, well, it's to sandbox. So if there's a test, like, for example, with drones, there was a law in the book that said that the pilot has to be in the plane. So they had to create like a separate regulation so that they could test drones.
Okay.
So they already had the toolkit and to be able to do this. So why do they need these wider, grander, more elaborate powers?
Right.
I never got a response from the department. I never got a response from the ministry. Yeah. And the answers that have been given in the House of Commons when other MPs have since raised it do not address the issue. So we don't know. And I think that's why Andrew and I are really worried about the slippery slope.
Quickly, and then maybe Chantal is less worried. I don't know.
The intent may or may not be about spurring innovation, et cetera. But the language of the bill is any minister, any law for which that minister is responsible, they can exempt it. It's not about, it doesn't, the language of the bill doesn't say just for the purposes of sandboxing and experimentation, et cetera.
Well, it does say for innovation and whatnot.
Okay,
it is in
Chantal's take. Is it something that we should be worrying about as much as our colleagues?
I worry about it as part of a larger picture, which is the trickle-down effect of Bill C-5, which allows the government to designate a project and say we're taking off most of the rules. Because I'm seeing, you know, what's happening with legislation in BC, what's happening this week with legislation in Quebec, this example in the budget. And it seems to me that a lot of governments are using a crisis to dispense with accountability on a whole load of fronts.
Things,
I do believe it's going to come back to bite them, because when they do use it and people see in practice what these things mean, there will be a backlash, and that the cost of that will be public trust in the government.
And so as we learn, now before I get to that, I just wanted to say I was on with Neil Oliver this morning on his broadcast should be up by this afternoon. And Neil and I have become very good friends over the last couple of years, and although we never actually met in person. What does that remind you of? There are so many people in my life who I only see virtually. You know, Katie DeSitney is one of them. Hope to rectify that in the near future. But Neil Oliver, of course, is somebody who reached out to me, first of all, because he was concerned about what's happening in Canada is very much what's happening in the UK. So we talked about the digital ID. We talked about censorship and surveillance laws that are coming down in Canada. They've already come down in the UK. We talked about the woman who had her privacy and her dignity violated by 11 police officers, 10 of them male, because she dared to use a objectionable word in a private text message. We talked about this the other day, and Neil, of course, was saying, who are you worried about now in terms of who's the danger to your life? Increasingly, we don't look to the police as our defenders. We look to the police now as trying to take away our freedom. This is not where I come from. Not where I come from at all. As a military man, as the son of another military man, I grew up respecting the police as an arm of legitimate authority. I'm finding that position harder and harder to maintain, more and more untenable, as the police become more and more politicized. And that's what's happening in this world right now. And I'm certainly not one of these people who wants to defund the police and give it all to social workers. But I want the police to become depoliticized. They are far too close to the liberal government, and they have been now for over a decade. And this has got to stop. So I encourage you to watch the interview. I will promote it as soon as it's up. But Neil and I had a lot to talk about. And I found it interesting that I'm increasingly characterizing the government we have in Canada as fascist. And I don't like to throw around that word fascist because, as George Orwell noted in about 1946, 47, I think, said, fascism has ceased to be meaningful except to describe something unpleasant. Because people had forgotten it was an economic theory, it was an ideology, largely articulated by Benito Mussolini, but other right-wing philosophers contributed to it. And it worked out to a system where the government is in control of the private sector, not in terms of nationalizing the means of production, but in terms of just controlling them and favoring crony capitalists who are in the club above anybody else who's not in the club. And that's exactly how Mark Carney is running this government. So I encourage you to watch that. I want to get to what's going on with Alberta. Before we do that, this is fascinating. Now, why do you think Mark Carney wants Pierre Poilievre out of the way? Why do you think? This is why the collusion between Mark Carney lives in the taxpayer-funded MSM Psy-Ops to cancel Pierre Poilievre has been so strong. Carney corruption must be fully exposed. Now, this is a Main Street poll, which is generally, I think, among the most accurate. And look at this. This is exactly what I was saying yesterday. This is how Pierre Poilievre can win. He's got to keep emphasizing the corruption. So this is a conservative majority government of 173 seats. The NDP down to 3. And of course, the Conservatives would benefit from the NDP collapse. This is almost a complete collapse for the NDP. We're almost down to a two-party system if you ignore the Bloc as a legitimate political party. And I do. I ignore the Bloc. I don't think they're a legitimate political party. I think they're grifters. I think they're just there to sabotage the country and take a taxpayer-funded salary and pension in the process. But this is very revealing. Look at that, eh? Look at that. And Jeffrey Rath, I'll be talking to Jeff tonight and probably sharing the interview with you tomorrow. But Jeffrey Rath is very much on side with the West Coast pipeline through Montana, Idaho, and Washington. Was on the agenda today in D.C. This is happening. Alberta will be free. Now, there's increasing acceptance of a pipeline that doesn't go through BC, because BC is too much of a wild card, and BC politics are just so crazy. Not to mention the fact that private property is dead in British Columbia. They are the province that is lauding and promoting and allowing this idiocy called Indigenous title or Aboriginal title to take private property rights away. Now, John Carpay will be on the show Monday. And of course, John is the primary spokesman for the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. And they've just released a great report. The Justice Center announces its latest publication, Death by 1,000 Clicks, The Rise of Internet Censorship and Control in Canada, authored by veteran journalist and researcher Nigel Hannaford. The report outlines how a series of federal bills have collectively, another Nigel again, have collectively transformed Canada's once open internet into a state-managed digital environment that restricts what Canadians may access, share, and say online. Report author Nigel Hannaford said, "It is important for Canadians to know that these bills are not isolated technical updates. Together, they form a coordinated shift towards state-managed digital speech. If we value open debate, privacy, and democratic accountability, we need to repeal the laws already passed and stop the ones now before Parliament," he added. Yeah, please support the Justice Center. Please support the Justice Center. They have done so. And Daniel Smith is behind this. And of course, one of the big news, is that the Alberta referendum is going ahead. Despite the idiocy from a judge saying it's unconstitutional, Alberta can't make that decision. Yes, it can. It will. There will be a referendum on Alberta independence coming up in 2026. Elections Alberta has approved a citizen-driven initiative to begin collecting signatures for a proposed constitutional referendum on Alberta's independence. If it moves forward, voters would be asked, do you agree that the province of Alberta should cease to be a part of Canada, to become an independent nation? So, things are moving quickly in this front. And as I shared with Neil Oliver this morning in our interview, our discussion, our conversation, our discourse, this is highly significant because Alberta might be the one way of saving Canada from Mark Carney. I'm not sure we're going to get this government defeated, because there could be more conservatives coming. And now, what did I say yesterday? How can Pierre Poilievre win? And no, I want to make this quite clear to everybody out there watching and saying, Creighton, you're in the pocket now of Pierre Poilievre. I'm in nobody's pocket. What I'm trying to do is save Canada from Marxist Carney, because this man wants to take away our foundational freedoms, including free speech. And if he's allowed to do that, we haven't got a country anymore. I keep saying that. And not just that we lose a democracy, but this won't be a country anymore. And it's quite revealing. And this is why they want to cancel Pierre Poilievre, because under Pierre Poilievre, the Conservatives are poised to win a majority government. Now, you might say, well, it's a moot point, because when are we going to have an election now? It looks highly unlikely that we're going to have an election. And that's very true. We might not have an election. But John Carpay will be on the show next week, and we're going to be talking about Psy-Ops, and we're going to be talking about Bill C-9, which has been held up, but I don't know how much longer it's going to be held up. So, I want to show a bit of my last interview with John Carpay. because he's a very intelligent, articulate man who I think really understands the tremendous danger that Canada is facing right now. So we're going to have a look at that. But want to throw this out there for all of you viewers. What did you think of Candace Owens' broadcast yesterday? Or was it yesterday? Yeah. Yes, it was yesterday. Oh, life is moving so fast here. Sometimes I wonder. It was yesterday's broadcast with Candace Owens. She talked about her, 4-hour discussion with Erica Kirk. Now, did you think she folded? Did you think she collapsed? Did you think you watched the same broadcast as I did? I don't know, because I watched a bunch of other broadcasts, and to tell you the truth, I don't watch every YouTube broadcast about the Charlie Kirk assassination because it becomes just way too obsessive. And it's just too many theories overlapping. But I listened to the commentary about Candace Owens' commentary, and people are getting wildly different views. I watched one broadcast, Valhalla. He's a former special forces guy. And generally, I think he's not always in the bag for Candace. He generally agrees with her, but he's prepared to be critical in his assessment. And he thought she was basically giving an exoneration to Erica Kirk. I thought to some degree that's true. However, other people think they heard Candace Owens say that she now believes that the guy in custody is the one who killed Charlie Kirk. And I find that really difficult to believe. So we'll have to keep watching. If she continues to exonerate Erica Kirk and then proceeds to exonerate Turning Point USA, saying that no, there were no financial irregularities there. There was no skimming. There was nobody profiteering. And Charlie Kirk wasn't trying to actively stop the profiteering and the money laundering and the tremendous problems, financial problems, and financial deception that was going on at Turning Point. If she goes there, then I'm saying, yeah, she's been bought off with this. But I don't think she's done that yet. Now, I do want to show this clip with John Carpe because it's all about Psy-Ops and how this government is trying to influence the way you think about everything. And it got really serious during the pandemic. Knowledge of innovative policy approaches, which I read that as lie. and support the government in addressing complex policy and program challenges through behavioral insights, data analytics, and social innovation. In other words, the Canadian government, quote, enhances, unquote, Canadians' knowledge of the kinds of things the government wants them to be, quote, informed about, unquote, such as the safety, quote unquote, of vaccines and the danger, quote unquote, of not taking them, such that Canadians are more likely to support the government's policies. Is this any different than the sort of propaganda you saw under Joseph Goebbels in the Third Reich, or what the Soviet Union peddled? This is all about telling people what they should think, how they should feel, and if they don't, they're not really part of the community anymore.
Well, the National Socialists in Germany, propaganda minister Goebbels in particular, were quite familiar with the fact that has also been known by other governments before, probably even before that time and afterwards. When people hear a message dozens of times or hundreds of times or thousands of times, they come to believe that it's true. And so the National Socialists in Germany used this very effectively. They controlled the media, even to a greater extent. And in Canada, we've got government-funded media that a lot of people are listening to, but there's an awful lot of people not listening to the CBC and Global and CTV, so on and so forth. So people do come to believe, come to accept as true what they hear over and over again. So we had these messages in 2020, we're all in this together, or my mask protects you, protects me, we're all protecting each other with these masks, you get that. Masks are keeping us safe. And unfortunately, there's people, they hear that a few dozen times and say, well, it must be true, because maybe deep down they don't believe that a false message could be repeated so often in so many places at so many times by so many people. But, unfortunately, governments do, I think they always have from time to time, and they always will promote false messages. And it's very sad that our own tax dollars are being used to manipulate our thinking that way.
Yes, extremely. I think this is the last section I wanted to highlight. How exactly was the WHO, the World Health Organization's behavioral insights tool, deployed in Canada? The IIU was tasked to find ways to reduce public anxiety about reports of adverse events following immunization. They focused its effort on reducing public anxiety about reported adverse events to the vaccine, rather than taking such reports seriously, despite having no long-term safety data of the vaccines in the first place. This, to me, is indictment in the 10th degree. So they told people, relax, don't worry, there's no problem here, without any evidence to say so, and growing evidence to the contrary. So I go back to the need for someone to be held accountable for putting out this propaganda, because this wasn't just feel-good propaganda. I can tell you, you don't feel very good when a relative drops dead because they had 4 or 5 jabs. You don't feel good about that, and you tend to be a little angry at a government that lied. And this is what I'm seeing here. Go ahead, lie about it, because the end justifies the means. And this is all about manipulation of people's minds, opinions, attitudes, and behaviors. This is government manipulation at the highest degree. And thank God you put this report out and are highlighting this. This should be read far and wide by media, especially, who were part of the problem, as you identified and as I identified. They were part of the problem during COVID. They have been part of the problem during other incidents, especially those surrounding avian flu, which the mainstream media is convinced is going to be the next pandemic. But clearly somebody should be held accountable for this, because this is not just about stretching the truth. This is about inventing facts and blatant propaganda.
I couldn't agree more. We have to work towards that point where when the majority of Canadians understand that lockdowns were not based on science, they were not medically necessary, when enough Canadians understand that the vaccine was neither safe nor effective, you have to get to that point where the culture has changed enough that this has come into the minds of the police, the Crown prosecutor, the judges, the lawyers. So we will get there. We just have to keep on educating. We have to keep on speaking the truth and educating our fellow citizens. And Canada will come to a place. It's up to us whether it's going to be 2 years or 20 years, but we will come to a place where there's opportunities to prosecute the guilty.
So I guess final question, John, are you relatively optimistic we can stop these censorship bills if MPs are informed, or at least feel the pressure from their constituents, if they feel that this would not be wise to vote in favor of these bills? Do you think we can stop these censorship bills that are coming?
Well, I think we can. It's people have to actually do the hard work, and it's not that hard, but look up who is your MP, find out. That's not that hard to do. The House of Commons has websites. There's other ways. Find out who your MP is if you don't know already. Contact him or her and send a short email saying, please vote against Bill C9, and type in your name and your address so they know that you are, the MP knows that you are one of her constituents or one of his constituents. And we have to try. I mean, the only thing necessary for evil to triumph is for good people to do nothing. So the worst thing we can do in this situation is do nothing and not contact our MPs to urge them to vote against Bill C9.
Well, I hope you're right. I'm not, perhaps not quite as optimistic, but I'm going to be fighting as hard as I can in any capacity I can possibly find. And that includes keeping the MPs informed. But I think what you're doing at the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms is a huge part of that battle, of that mission. And you serve that purpose extremely well on a day-to-day basis. That's why I support your organization the way I always have. And I support the work you're doing, John, on behalf of Canadians who are fighting and in many cases being persecuted by a ravenous government, federal government especially, but sometimes provincial as well, that disregards their rights, disregards foundational freedoms in this country, and consists of a desire to enforce, I think, an increasing authoritarian regime in this country. And we don't push back, I guess it's our own fault if this comes to pass. And I think that was the lesson of J.D. Vance's recent post on X. And some Canadians objected to that. A lot of Canadians said, right on. Stop blaming Donald Trump and the United States for Canada's problems. You elected these bums. You elected these people to make these bad decisions that you're living with today. And it's in our power to stop electing people like that and to start electing people who actually work for us. So I appreciate your time today, John. It's always a pleasure to have you on this show, and you're always welcome. And God bless and Godspeed. And we'll see you again soon.
Thanks for having me on your show. Have a great rest of the day, David.
And John Carpe will be with us again on Monday to discuss Bill C9. Now, I want to show you something here I think is interesting. Tasha Keratin. Do you think Tasha Keratin's a conservative? I don't mean small c or upper. I don't know if either uppercase C or lowercase c. You remember who Tasha Keratin supported in the last conservative leadership race? It was Jean Charest, a red Tory if there ever was one. Tasha Keratin also supported the invocation of the Emergencies Act. So I don't consider her a conservative. But here she is trying to get Pierre Poilievre removed in a subtle way. The conservatives who could replace Pierre Poilievre. And who do you think one of those conservatives would be? Well, I can tell you with some degree of certainty. Doug Ford wants this badly. I don't think Danielle Smith wants it badly. I think she's mused about it. She's thought about it. She figures maybe someday. But she's already announced that she's supporting Pierre Poilievre as leader of the Conservative Party, despite their difference over the pipeline, MOU. So I think that's a given. Doug Ford, though, is dangerous. And Doug Ford is surrounded by faux conservatives who have been working for Doug Ford and working for his faux conservative agenda for the past 10 years or so. And do not think these people really are principled conservatives in any way imaginable, because they're not. Oh, is someone spying on the chat? What? Why would somebody say that? Is someone spying on the chat? Well, I've got to. Yeah, tell a lie, bigger the lie, the better. Repeat it often enough, people will believe it. Yes, the liars in the history have said that. Yeah, and that's, I'm just having a look. So. I'm just having a look at your comments here. Well, I'm glad at least we've got some comments coming in today. Yeah. Dougie Trudeau. Yes. Candy Cane. I love Candy Cane. Oh, yes. Doug Ford is a liberal and conservative clothing. Very, very true. And too bad. Oh, where is it? Too bad Rob Ford, excuse me, wasn't still with us. Even with his drug problem, he was smarter and had bigger balls. Yeah, certainly did. So I encourage you to watch. The Conservative Corner tonight at 6:30 Eastern Time. 6:30 p.m. Eastern Time with Nico Lagan and myself. We're going to be talking about Pierre Poilievre and what this Psy-Op means, why the Liberals want him out, why the mainstream media has been co-opted, why the pollsters are even pushing this agenda. Oh, you're welcome, Candy Cane. You're welcome. Why are the pollsters pushing this cancellation of Pierre Poilievre? Telling us, oh, Canadians really aren't conservative at all. They don't want Pierre Poilievre there. And I'm sorry, if Pierre Poilievre doesn't pass the muster test, if he's too conservative for Canada, God help this country. Because Pierre Poilievre is quite a moderate conservative. Whether you think that's a good thing or a bad. And I don't think we need too much moderation in our conservatism. I think we need a hardline approach to things. But he's a pretty moderate guy. And if that's too extreme for the mainstream media, if that's too extreme for the pollsters, then I don't know what to make of this country, because we got some serious problems here. So watch the Conservative Corner tonight. And like I said, I'll be interviewing Jeff Rath, the legal counsel for the Alberta Prosperity Project, which of course is the voice of separation, the voice of Alberta independence. And we'll be talking about the road ahead. And I'll probably broadcast that tomorrow. And Candy Cane, because why? Because Pierre is on point. Yes. Yeah. I just feel like sharing some comments today. You know you're doing something right when they're up in arms. Laugh out loud. You betcha. You betcha. So thanks for watching today, folks. And I'll have well, we're not that much shorter than usual. But anyway, thank you for your comments today. Thank you for being a part of this show. Thank you for sharing this with your friends and family. Oh, silly me. You know what I forgot to do? Yeah. It's Christmas. Just a week away. Tomorrow.
Ho, 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 ho.
who cares?
Thank you all for watching. And I should mention, keep buying the ostrich merchandise, because I was able to send a check yesterday to Katie Pisitney and her mom at Universal Ostrich Farms for $1,500. And we're going to keep sending whatever money we make from those ostrich t-shirts and hoodies. It's a pleasure. And by the way, I had a note from Katie yesterday. She's back today. She's on her way right now from Kelowna to the farm, and she wants to get back to work. And we are going to be working on a way to get that quarantine lifted so that farm can survive. We need to do that. Bye for now, folks. We'll be back again tomorrow with more of the news you need to know.
Thank you for sharing this station with your friends and family. Thank you for hitting that like button, because I tell you, we are fighting back in a way I've never had to before, because I'm going to keep this station on the air. I'm going to keep fighting for freedom. I'm going to keep fighting for justice and truth. And I am damn determined to resist this Carney government in any way possible as it encroaches upon our individual freedom. And it will continue to do that, mark my words. I'll be back again tomorrow. Same time, same place. 10 a.m. This has been David Creighton, broadcasting live from our nation's capital in Ottawa. Thank you for watching. We'll see you again tomorrow.